this is Ian Berry, and welcome to another Sparker Nation conversation. In this case, number 15, with my great friend and colleague, Allan Parker. Nice to see you again, mate.
Good to see you. Great
and
to
perhaps
be
just a reminder of a Sparker Nation. It's a spark that ignites passion, that leads to action, that changes what's normal.
Yep, love it.
And part of our conversation, Allan, isn't it, that we are helping people to shift away from the status quo when sameness is no longer serving us.
Yeah, yes.
And I think that I can see, as we were sort of talking offline, we're now in this kind of, I don't know, it's a propaganda something or other. You know, we've got all this stuff, all this noise. Not a bit of it's true.
Yep. Not
even remotely true. I read the other day, you know, we don't have conspiracy theories anymore. We've got conspiracies, but no theory. which I think my apologies, I forget the writers, but it only came out in the press a couple of days ago.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of, I mean, I had a laugh as well. I know you've just been to Rome and spent some time teaching priests about negotiation, as I understand it, which but I had a bit of a laugh because the meaning of the word propaganda is a gathering of cardinals, which makes me laugh out loud.
That's fascinating.
But this is, we're in the grip of propaganda.
Yeah.
You know, whole lot of opinion sharing based on ideology, and yet wise conversations are actually about sharing our feelings and thoughts much more than our opinions.
Yeah.
So I thought you and I having a chat about that might help folk to kind of differentiate between the bullshit and the reality.
Yeah. 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 As you've heard me say before, and in these conversations, the noise level is just getting greater and overriding the substance.
It's deafening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I frequently talk about, excuse me while I clear my throat. Pardon me. I frequently talk about the importance of just staying on the peripheral of the interaction and just be still and present and sort and stay out of the noise, but just stay out and watch and go and listen and go, noise or substance? Do I need to get in here, or do I need to stay out? And I think that the wisdom of being aware enough to make the choice of not entering and getting caught in that noise, the propaganda, the conspiracy, and for us to be wise enough not to contribute or spark it.
Yeah, that's an interesting and powerful observation. I left Twitter because I wasn't being wise enough.
Right.
Found myself engaging in the bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, I was fortunate I didn't experience any bullying or anything like that, and I was very careful in sharing my opinions, but I realised, as a result of a conversation we had in one of our groups where Terry, one of the great and long-standing members, he talked about how there's a need to have opinions, but to take them lightly.
Yeah.
And that's a real,
I've heard you use that term before. It's a lovely term. It
was a real refreshing moment for me, because I found myself on Twitter, I was in a bit of a tangle, and all of a sudden I was starting to go down this path of, you know, sharing my opinions and ideologies as though they were facts.
Yeah.
And Terry, and that conversation we had in the group, which goes back a couple of years, but it was just a wonderful relief to because it's okay to have opinions, but it's powerful just to hold them lightly.
Yeah.
And in the groups, as you know, we've been on this quest to really honor opinions, but to hold them lightly, but to move the conversations more to our feelings and thoughts and optimum levels where, you know, we respect silence, for example. But it's hard to do. And I think your insight there about we've got to have the wisdom to make the choice between, do we get involved in the noise or do we just leave the noise?
Yeah.
And only get involved in the substance.
Yeah.
A lot harder to do than it's easy to say.
Oh. But Ian, I've worked for years and years on a really obvious and simple tool, technique, skill, if you like.
Yeah.
To make sure that I give myself the best chance of not jumping into sticky tangles, as I call them. And it is to just, when you finish speaking, if people watch the video, you'll notice that when you finish speaking, the next thing I do is breathe in through my nose. And it's not until I've finished the breathing through my nose that I come in and speak.
Just a little anchoring technique to
just to go breathe, just to put that momentary pause for me to go, do I actually move forward and get involved in this, or do I, what in the world of negotiation we call just hold ground?
Yes.
And hold ground just means be still.
Yes.
Yeah, don't move, be still.
I was really inspired by a talk that Dr. Jill Bolte gave. She's in your neuroscientist league.
Right.
And she remarked, and she suffered a stroke, and the TED talk that people can just Google, it's a wonderful insight, but she says, we are feeling creatures who think, and we've created a world that's the other way around. Now, I stopped watching that. I just pressed pause on the YouTube at that moment because I really found it a deeply valuable insight.
I have to pause because I've got to let that one go in and in and in and in until it drops. Yeah.
It took me, it was probably 10 or 15 minutes before I started playing the talk again.
Yeah.
And I think, often, we've had this, it's better now than it was 30 years ago, but blokes in particular still have trouble sharing their feelings.
Yeah.
They're good at sharing opinions, but when their opinions are presented as facts, that's when the trouble starts.
Yeah. Yep.
This whole stuff in Australia around the voice.
Yeah.
There's nothing complicated about it that I can see. Should be an overwhelming yes vote.
Yep.
But now we've got noise based on ideology, flawed ideology, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Born out of either ignorance or arrogance or both. And I find this trilogy sums up the propaganda in the world. So we've got ideology, ignorance, and arrogance. I call it the great challenge.
Yeah.
And so when I hear someone say something, I'm doing the momentary pause. I'm taking a breath. I haven't been conscious of it until you mentioned it, but I'm taking a breath because I want to ascertain, is this ideology?
Yeah. And
is it coming from ignorance or arrogance?
Yeah.
If so, I better be careful about what I say next.
Yeah.
Because a wise conversation is not possible if we're tangled up in ideology that comes from ignorance and arrogance.
Yeah. 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 No, that sticky noise just.
But it's difficult.
Difficult to do. It's just how do I get this off me?
Because it's like it becomes after a while. You just know it's what being said is not coming from the heart. It's coming from, I don't quite know where, but I think at part of it is that we have a real big problem in the world today, and that is lack of self-esteem. And the way people protect themselves from low self-esteem is to engage in propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Putin is a primary example. I think he's just totally low self-esteem. And you know, when you got that at the basis, you know, people can do crazy things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as we're discussing, it's increasingly difficult to get away from the noise and only engage in the substance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So having a breath is a good move. How do we cultivate this wisdom of knowing the difference?
Yeah.
Because there are some things, you know, I got a text the other day, and I just for a moment I thought this is real. I mean, it was a spam.
Yep.
But it sounded real.
Yes. Yep.
And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of these conspiracies without theories, they sound on the surface, they sound legitimate.
Yeah.
And you can get sucked in.
Yeah. Very, very easily.
So how do we cultivate this wisdom to tell the difference between noise and substance?
Yeah. I think there's the interaction that you and I can be in and watch and assess and be aware of and monitor. But I think there's a deeper level of this, what I call dramatization going on. And I'm fascinated. I don't frequently watch television. And most of the time, if I do watch it, it's usually reasonably short, but 9 times out of 10, I leave for 3 major reasons. And the first one is this constant background of dramatic crescendoing noise.
Yes.
That it's hard for your pulse rate not to increase.
Evidence in so-called reality TV shows which aren't real. That's the great irony.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of drama, and when these things are announced and advertised, and the programs themselves, there's all this drama.
Yeah.
Yes.
And drum roll in the back.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And the average person just experiences that and doesn't notice the impact it's having because their nervous system and their brain has been so conditioned to it, they've normalized it.
Oh, yeah.
And now they live in a subclinical state of chronic stress.
Unbelievable. So there's a sparkination needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've got to get better, all of us, and have got to get better at noticing what sparks me in an unproductive way.
Yes.
And because I'm a pacifist and absolutely opposed to any form of violence, I don't use the commonly used term of triggering because it's part of a gun. But all of this stuff sparks our alert or our fight-flight system.
Yes.
And we're constantly in an over-alert state, which I described as busy, impatient, overloaded, and too many things on. And I haven't got time and I'm distracted. And I'm only half with you because I'm thinking about the next thing I've got to go to. And that's become so normalized.
Yes.
I think there's a need for a larger systemic intervention somewhere, somehow. Yeah. And unfortunately, human beings usually do their dramatic changes when something catastrophic occurs. E.g., we've got the dreadful earthquake in Turkey, and the community cohesion and coming together and the generosity in crises that we are able to muster frequently is quite staggering, which indicates we've got a deep desire for it.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly human trait that when one of us is in trouble, we can't help but try and help them.
And it just sparks the compassionate part of me.
Yep. So a spark of nation, of course, is a spark that ignites passion.
Yeah.
So, because I think this is emotional one. The reason why there's such a great response, incredible, over 12,000 people dead. It's just heartbreaking,
horrendous.
But the heart response from the people themselves is inspiring.
Yeah.
And I think it's deeply human, this compassion.
Yep.
It really is, as Confucius said, to treat other people as we desire to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Christians didn't invent the golden rule. Confucius invented that 500 years earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's evident in all crises. We've had a lot of bushfires and floods here in Australia, and it's the same. You see the same humanness happening.
Yeah.
And I think part of the wisdom is, how do we cultivate that compassion?
Yeah.
When there's not a crisis.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely concur.
And part of it, I'm sure, is more feeling, thoughts, conversations, more emotionally intelligent conversations.
Yeah.
At a local level that push up.
Yeah.
To reach the higher levels.
Yeah.
I also think that it's creating systems within our local environments that actually eventually will make the systems that are broken obsolete.
Yeah.
Because Buckminster Fuller's insight long ago that we really can't change the systems. We've got to create different ones that make the old ones obsolete. And I think I can see that very much happening at a grassroots level in lots of places.
Yeah. Ian, I think the time to give up on hope that the change will come from the top, from the politicians or the executives in organizations, because I think they've had long enough.
Won't happen.
They haven't pulled it off yet.
No, and they're not going to.
I'm, part of my thinking and part of my work over the last 20 years particularly has been looking at ways of mobilizing individuals and having individuals find a buddy and have them find another two individuals.
Yeah.
How do we start what I'd call a compassionate, caring community?
Yes.
And but maybe a passionate a compassionate, caring community who want to put their energy into learning rather than drama.
Yes, wonderful. Yes.
And I think it's part of why I encourage people who come to do my courses to keep in touch with each other. And in fact, the gift of COVID has been twofold for me. One is it means that I do half of my teaching in 1.5 or 2 hour blocks online.
Yes.
And I've got three organizations that I'm working with at the moment, running courses in some form of negotiation or leadership.
Yes.
And we meet for 1.5 hours or 2 hours once a week. And we do that for 10 or 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And Ian, the uptake when stuff's offered in small bites and we do incremental change.
Yes.
It's so much more effective than bringing them together for a 2 or 3 day course.
Yeah, I'm working in the same space as you know. I've got my the Art of Conversations program going. So it's 10 sessions in a year.
Yeah.
And it is that little bit by little bit. It embraces two wonderful concepts that we've talked about before, but I think they're worth mentioning again. First is the science of quantum leaps.
Yep.
Because what the science says, it's not a big leap as most people think it is. It's actually a very small shift. It's actually a jump from here to there, but it's tiny.
Small incrementals.
I call them small yet significant shifts.
Yep.
And then it's the wonderful insight of the aggregation of marginal gains.
Yep.
Which I first learned from that great book, Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Which it's the insight into the British cycling team who looked at everything that they could imagine and just wanted to improve it by 1%.
Yep.
And they ended up highly successful in all forms of cycling.
Yep. So
I think those two things are really powerful ways to implement, because one of the things that we've been talking about in our groups, and we're now going to dedicate 5 sessions this year to actually implementation.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have got great ideas and are inspired by the other conversations, but implementation is not going as well as it could.
Yep.
Nor is the integration of what's working, of the new learning with what's already going well.
Yep.
And I think that's a thing, because and I was just reading something this morning. Australia has a great opportunity to be an renewable energy powerhouse, but we're dragging the chain, and we're going to be knocked over by the Americans and others.
Yep.
If we don't get off our bum and actually do something.
Yep.
Too much talk, not enough action.
I've just left a meeting with the wonderful Dr. Stephanie Burns, and had
that's a blast from the past for me.
2-hour extended breakfast conversation, which was stimulating as always. And
indeed.
I think it's a 7th or 8th book. She's just in the process of the final stages of her next book. And it is about the identifying the obstacles that interrupt implementation.
Right.
And once you identify the obstacle, you don't talk about the obstacle, you work on the tool to remove it, to go through it, to go around it, under it, over it, throw it out.
Wonderful.
And
well, as you know, we identified
two great minds, and you're both using the same terminology about the same behavioral phenomena.
Well, it's always good when people are not connected currently are coming up with the same things. Yeah. In our group, we've identified several of these obstacles, and we're now working on how do we get past those obstacles. Now, of course, one of the obstacles is the ideology, ignorance, arrogance problem.
Yep.
Because that stops implementation.
Yep.
And the others we'll talk about in due course. But I think we're onto something really important here.
Yep.
In order to have the wisdom to know the difference between noise and substance.
Yep.
We need to be thinking small, yet significant shifts.
Yes. Yep.
But I guess a step before that is we've still got to be able to identify what's noise and what's not.
Yep.
The breath, taking a small breath, helps with that. Some of your wonderful phrases.
Magic words.
We began with.
Magic words.
When I use offering it, that's fascinating.
Yes.
Can we talk more?
My dear friend Cynthia Johnson is fascinating. Oh, how curious.
I often, will go on to say, maybe we could park that one and have a conversation about that, offline, because that's really an opinion more than a feeling. I say that to the people that I'm, you know, that we've already got a safe container and we're able to make statements like that.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, yeah, it is an opinion, but, you know, maybe I can express it as a feeling, and then the conversation can continue.
Yes. Yeah.
Because opinions get in the way of wise conversations.
Yeah, sure do. Yep. I mentioning Stephanie Burns flicked me back, and I'm sure I've mentioned this. Have I mentioned to you the research project I did for Stephanie Burns in 1992?
Yes, we've covered that, but it wouldn't hurt to mention it again, because I think it's relevant to our conversation.
It's because the noise, my theory from that research is that the noise that comes out in our conversations actually originates in the paddock between my ears. And Stephanie asked me if I'd do a presentation in a workshop at a program on essentially the nuts and bolts of how learning takes place. And she was interested in me looking at what was the impact of, going back to your term, self-esteem or self-image. And I worked on the premise that self-esteem and self-image lived in the conversation inside our head. And I then, from that conversation, make the pictures that create the feeling, and I then confuse that with who I am. And so I forget how many I interviewed. It's somewhere between 200 and 300, I think, but it was a lot. And I actually just, as a linguist, I asked them questions about what it was that was going on inside their head at certain periods of time. And I'd get them to see if they could verbalize for me what was going on. And things that I came out, and linguistic analysis was that over 90% of everybody I interviewed, the language pattern indicated that most of what they were doing inside their head was monologue.
Yes.
That wasn't a conversation at all.
So there's really two identifications here, two distinctions. We've got inside noise and outside noise.
Outside. Yep.
And the two are going on at once, which clouds our judgment.
Sorry, I'm interrupted. My apologies.
No,
it's a cybernetic circuit. They interact and feed each other. Now, the interesting thing, Ian, if the amount of pessimism in the monologue was much higher than the optimism.
Yeah.
And the amount of pessimism or optimism had a direct impact on what the feeling and emotion obviously was. So you could wind yourself down and you could wind yourself up.
Yes.
The other things that I found, and this was, it took me 6 months to get to this point, but I then started tracking all the patterns of what people had been telling me. And I discovered that people would hear something in a conversation and they would immediately make an assumption about it, often before even the end of the sentence. The assumption led to an opinion. The opinion led to a judgment. And the moment the judgment occurred, there was an emotional reaction that turned up in the nonverbal signals. The next,
I would say that the assumption went to an ideology that became an opinion that became a judgment.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the judgment had a physiological effect.
Yes.
Which is, in many of the instances in the interview, was visibly visible. Now, the next comment that came out of their mouth, Ian, was invariably a premature extrapolated conclusion. It's one of my favorite terms, a premature extrapolated conclusion. Or technically speaking, it was a premature unextrapolated conclusion. but I took my opinion and actually made a decision about it and its validity. So that's no good to us. We won't do that. That's never going to work.
No.
And sometimes people verbalize them and sometimes they don't. And then the next thing that came out was evidence that they'd made a decision unilaterally. So I'm not doing that. I won't go there. I won't tell her.
Takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
To not express a premature extrapolated conclusion.
Yeah. You'll notice that a lot of the time when you're talking, I've always got my hands clasped or touching my chin. Now, I particularly touch my chin when you say something and I go, oh yeah, I want to say something on that.
Yeah.
And the touching of my chin reminds me to shut up.
Yes,
So
another good.
And when you're saying something really interesting and I can see that the next bit's going to be more interesting, I actually put my fingers on my lips, just as a double reminder to say, don't you dare open your mouth. Now, I've been practicing that for 25 years.
I think it helps because often when, and I've seen this in many conversations of recent times in our groups, that we go from opinion to feeling and the mood changes.
Yep.
And there's a discipline involved. We're not saying that we shouldn't share opinions. We should have deliberate conversations to share our opinions, because that's, dialogue about opinions is a good thing to do. But I think it's now taken over the wider conversations, and there's therefore the substance is being lost. E.g., conversations about the voice, conversations about becoming, a powerhouse in renewable technology, great concepts, substance, great substantive concepts lost now in the noise of division and propaganda and just plain bullshit.
Two connections there, if I can. One is that if I go through that process you've just articulated, from a brain science point of view, the moment I premature extrapolate a conclusion, I have a picture of it. The moment I then make a decision, I'm going to or I'm not going to, which has an ing in it, which means it's an active statement. That then triggers not only the picture in my brain, but it's now a movie, not a still picture. And that hits the button on what you just talked about, triggers the emotion associated with it.
And you've got a flawed decision now out in the arena.
Frightening is once it becomes a moving picture, I behave absolutely from that moment as if it's true. Based on the premature extrapolated conclusion, the judgment, the opinion, it's got to be a hallucination.
But it gains momentum.
That sure does.
When it's matched up with someone who has the same ideology.
Absolutely.
This is the American election story. The whole thing that the election was rigged is just plain utter bullshit. But we've now got maybe 80 million people who think it's true because of a premature extrapolated conclusion, or many of them.
A side example, Ian, I'm managing a very, very, very large conflict at the minute, which impacts every person in Australia. And it's messy and complicated. It doesn't need to be complex even, but it's very complicated. And I've been reading lots of documentation and legislation and terms of reference, frames of reference, and policy documents, just to make sure that I get out of opinion or premature extrapolated conclusion. I'm working with the facts. I came across a statement And it was a statement about a whole group of people who were coming together to work collaboratively and cooperatively so that they could make consensual decisions in the best interest of everyone. And it named the 8 different groups of people who were going to be able to be in the meeting. And then it said +1, sorry, it then said plus a project owner. And as a linguist, I went, oops, a project owner. That either means that there's multiple projects or there's multiple owners.
Yes.
If there's only one project or one owner, it'd be the project owner. And so I went, oh, we can't, this is an invalid frame of reference. So I thought I better check my assumption out here. So the next week I interviewed about 13 people. And I asked them, I brought out the phrase out of the document, read it to them. And I said, can you tell me what the project is that's referring to? And can you tell me who's the owner of that project who can attend the meeting? And I got 9 different answers to what the project was. And I got 6 different answers to who the owner was. And I sort of go, how many times a day are we doing that?
Multiple.
And Ian, it was one sentence in a 15-page document about the terms and conditions of operation.
It's a couple of takeouts for me for today, because I know you've got something else coming up shortly, but we need to have a lot of diligence to actually read the 15 pages. That's a great metaphor for because
Ian,
rather than an instant reaction, we need to go and check the detail.
Ian, as a negotiator or as a conflict resolver or a crisis manager, I would have no work whatsoever if people took the time and were rigorous enough about their preparation and reading the documents that are necessary and the documents that define the boundaries that we operate in. You know,
and that's part of the other takeout for me, because I've got to add something to my decision-making process. I've got to ask the question: is this a premature extrapolated conclusion? Just in case I've missed something, before implementation.
And did you have any discussion before that decision?
I mean, well, part of my decision-making process always involves the people that are going to be impacted by the decision.
Yes.
But even then, depending on, force of personality, there's all sorts of things can go wrong. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that to the process, just as a bit of a check.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're going off half-cocked.
Yeah.
And there's so many dangers in going off when the decision's flawed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, world wars have happened because of this.
Yeah. And Ian, an example like that means that the entire conversation that's gone on about that in the past has to have been at cross purposes.
No doubt.
Just noise, total waste of oxygen.
Yeah.
But it echoes to me something Stephanie Burns was talking about, was that the way through and out of complexity is to take something simple and go through it. And I thought it was a wonderful comment.
Yeah, I'm in alignment. I've always believed that the greater the complexity, the simpler the solution.
Yep.
Simple problems often have complex solutions, but complex problems usually have simple solutions.
Yep. High leverage impact points is my key learning for the day. Just those little things that if you get that, It just has a ripple effect on everything. Yeah. What's your key takeout, Mr.
Well, I think I'm going with this. Just check once I've made a decision that it's not a premature extrapolated conclusion. Because I think that's a key, because, you know, God forbid that we would be implementing
Yes.
when the strategy is flawed.
Yeah. And also, how often do I make that premature extrapolated conclusion, forget to check what anybody else thinks, and walk out thinking that it's actually been decided?
Oh, so much trouble has happened in businesses and
Yeah.
politics and pretty much every other institution you can name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we went out, you know, I wonder, for example, I see, you know, some person leaves the Greens because they can't support the Voice, and then the Greens come out and make a decision that they're going to support the Voice, and then the following day some people are in the room, so we're not supporting it either. So I questioned what happened to, you know, cabinet solidarity, what happened to team coherence.
Yeah.
Because no team worth their salt lets their dirty linen be aired in the public. So what's been happening to the conversations in that? Because they've now undermined not just themselves, but the idea. Again, it's an example of a premature extrapolated conclusion. I hope Mr. Band can watch this video and get hold of that, because his party was going well until today, and now they've unravelled like the rest of them.
Yep.
So hopefully there's a.
We'll keep our fingers crossed on that one.
Indeed. Well, as always, Mr. Parker, this has been a wonderful conversation.
A complete joy. Thank you.
We'll look forward to continuing
to our next time. And would you be good enough to give your beautiful wife a hug for me?
I will do that. Indeed. All right.
Take great care, Ian.
Take care.
Bye.